Continuing the series on facing opponents of different rating levels. Now today we're playing a 1600 rated opponent, and we've got a French defence. So the idea of e6 is to prepare the move that black just played, d5. And there's a few different ways that white can play here. White can play e5, the advanced variation, or knight to c3, that's known as the classical variation. But the move that I like to play is knight to d2. This is the Tarrasch variation. Now the idea of this is that in case black were to play c5, you're able to respond with c3. The knight here, by coming to d2 rather than c3, means that the c-pawn is mobile. But given that black is instead captured in the centre, we're not going to get to see that. Now bishop to d7 has the idea of bringing the bishop to c6. Often in the French defence, this light-squared bishop for blacks is quite a bad piece. But by spending a couple of moves, black can get it to a good square. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to continue with natural development via bishop to d3, and I expect that black is going to play bishop to c6. That would be consistent anyway. Now the French defence, even though it looks a little timid, it can pack a powerful punch. It's got great counter-attacking potential. I used to play it myself with black. Not this particular line, but it's certainly not to be underestimated. Okay, so black is attacking this knight, but it is defended. However, this pawn is under attack, and I'm just going to defend that one with knight to f3. Developing a piece while also defending the pawn that was under attack. So let's see how black continues here. There's a few different ways to play this actually, as white. You can consider castling queenside or castling kingside, and given that this light squared bishop is pointing at my kingside, I am tempted to actually castle queenside here. So I'm going to just prepare that by playing the bishop out to e3, with the possibility of playing queen to d2, or maybe queen to e1 next, and that would allow queenside castling. Okay, so this is now attacking this knight twice. So the move that's being provoked here is this capture, and black will be able to capture back with the knight. So my opponent does know the opening theory here, so I think I've got a game on my hands, for sure. He'll take back with the knight, or at least he should do. That's the whole idea of bringing the knight out here, is to recapture, but he actually hasn't gone for that, which to me looks quite suspicious. Now, when your opponent plays a suspicious looking move in the opening, it's a good time to stop, think, and ask yourself, why is that move that my opponent just played, the move that I don't recognize, not the best move to play? Well, I think in this case it's because I've got the move bishop to g5. Now that's going to trap the black queen, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, after bishop to g5 is played, where does the black queen go? Well, it can't stay on this diagonal. It can't go to g6 or to h6. And it also can't go to e5 or to capture on d4. So all of those squares are taken. Now what black might have in mind is he perhaps planning bishop takes f3. That could be possible. Well, in that case, my queen would be attacked. So I've actually got a critical line to calculate here. So let's take a look. Bishop to g5. Now the black queen is trapped. So the only move which makes any sense is the critical line with bishop takes f3. So how do I respond to that? My queen is attacked, and I'm actually going to end up a piece down in that line, I believe. Now in a critical line you have to consider alternative moves. So after bishop to g5, if we got bishop takes f3, what if I were to, instead of capturing the queen, do something else? maybe, what if I were to move the queen to d2, for example? Well, then the black queen is attacked, and it could capture on d4 in that line. So this is actually quite a tricky move here from my opponent. I thought that I was winning the queen, but maybe I'm not actually. Maybe this is a cunning trap. So, as you can see, it's important to calculate these lines. I mean, bishop to g5 looked so tempting, but upon further reflection, I don't think it actually works. I don't think it actually wins material, and it may even lose material, thanks to this capture. Of course, if I move the queen out of the way, then black would be able to capture on g5. But the critical line that I'm looking at here is bishop to g5, bishop takes f3, queen to d2, queen takes on d4. So what I'm going to do here is actually offer a pawn sacrifice. And that's going to be with the move queen to d2. Now, if black wants to, black could capture this knight, and after I take back, capture with the queen. That's a pawn sacrifice, but then I'd be able to castle queenside, and think I'm okay with this line. Because black would be neglecting their own development. This piece took 2 moves for black to develop. Maybe he doesn't even have time to take here. Maybe I could respond to that with bishop to g5. Does that work actually? But then he's got queen takes d4. So already this game is getting quite tactical, as you can see. There's quite a bit to figure out here. So the threat here is bishop to g5. And black might be wondering how he's meant to respond to that. Now, bishop takes f3. In case of bishop to g5, he's got queen takes d4. So I think on bishop takes f3, I do have to take here. And then black will take back with the queen. And I've just noticed actually that I can't castle queenside in this line, because the queen would be blocking that diagonal. But what I'd have instead is I'd have an open g-file. So after I move the rook out of the way, that's necessary of course, then black might find it a bit hard to finish their development. I expect we're going to see bishop takes f3 here. That's what I'm predicting. So bishop takes f3, I take back with the pawn, and then black would take back with the queen. That's what I'm expecting anyway. And because the rook is under attack, I would have to move the rook away to the g-file. And in that line I've got an open g-file to attack if black were to castle kingside. Black also hasn't castled kingside though, so maybe that attacking line isn't quite so strong. But we can see here that black is taking their time to think. I mean, I did too, right? I took 5 minutes in that last position to come to the conclusion that actually bishop to g5 couldn't be played. Okay, so he's decided to prevent bishop to g5, which makes a lot of sense, but that does give me time to castle queenside. This was my whole idea. And now if black decides to castle kingside, then this pawn could act as a hook. That's what I'm counting on anyway. So what I mean by a hook, whenever one of the pawns moves away from the 7th rank, in black's case, right? So this is the ideal pawn formation if black were to castle kingside. But by advancing this pawn 4 to square, then that is a bit more open to attack. Now what black is choosing to do here is actually leave their king in the center, which is a risky decision, but that's what he's trying to do. Okay, so how can we play against that? Well, usually the idea when your opponent leaves their king in the center is to try and open the centre. So can we do that right away? Let's see. Well, the move d5 is the immediate way to try to open the centre, but then black could just take that. So I don't think that quite works. Knight to e5 is also a possibility, but after knight takes and pawn takes, does he have time to play queen takes? Maybe he does actually. So what I think I'm going to do actually is just bring a rook to a central file. Could that be the way to go? Also bishop to f4 is quite interesting, to add a bit of extra support to the knight to e5 plan, and as well threatens this pawn. I think this looks quite strong, so this is developing with a threat. Now how is black going to defend that pawn? Well, he could play bishop to d6, that would develop a piece off its starting square, as well as defending the c7 pawn. He could castle queenside, but that would seem a bit inconsistent with the move a5. So my opponent has made a couple of weakening pawn moves here, and all I'm really doing is looking to develop sensibly and try and take advantage of what's on offer. So now we've got the recapture on d6, and black's king is still in the centre, and I'm wondering how long he's prepared to leave it there for. I think if I play rook to e1, then he'd probably castle kingside, and then I'd be wishing that the rook was back on h1. So I'm going to move the other rook over with some pressure on the e-file, and if black goes and castles on this side, then this rook is a bit better placed. So an interesting game so far. Okay, now black has decided to take the knights, but now I feel as though I'm quite strong on the light squares. Now how can I take advantage of this? Well, there is the possibility of giving a fork here. That's one idea. That would attack the queen and also attack the pawn. I'm not sure if I would actually take that pawn or not, but this does win a tempo for sure. And where does the black queen go? It might go back to f6 perhaps. This looks quite good. Always a good idea to attack enemy pieces with a threat. Now capturing here would actually open up the b file, potentially for the benefit of my opponent. So I have to decide whether this gain of material is good for me or not. I could also push here. Of course, if he took, then I'd get everything I wanted because I could give this check, but he'd probably look to close the center in that case. So I'm looking at this. He'll go there, and then I could drop back with a pin, which would prevent black from castling. This looks pretty strong to me. I know that I'm giving my opponent rook to b8 in the open b file, but this is a double-edged position, and sometimes you have to go for double-edged lines. The thing is, I've got the follow-up bishop to c6 afterwards. So I'm anticipating my opponent's best response, and I'm getting ready for it. Now, interestingly, he's gone with rook to a7 instead, which I didn't expect, because I thought that he'd look to play on the b file. But I can create this pin, and I suppose black's idea is that he can castle and now have the knight defended. Yeah, that's exactly what he was thinking. Okay. So now then, can I keep creating threats? I actually quite like this bishop. I don't want to be in a hurry to trade it off. There is some possibility of attacking this tender square on h7, and I do have this semi-open g file which I can look to attack. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring the rook to the open file, lining it up against the black king. And now if the queen were to move away from the defense of h6, then I would have queen takes h6, thanks to the fact that the g-pawn would be pinned. Now I think a lot of players in that position would have captured the knight, but it was a pin, but now it's not a pin, and I actually like this bishop better than black's knight, so no need to trade. So how can I look to increase the pressure? Well, I think it's a caveman approach here of simply bringing pieces to the open file, right, to the g file. I think I play rook to g3 and then put the other rook behind it and just look to blast through as quickly as possible. Let's go with this. Now there could be some case here where I might give up the two rooks for the queen and the pawn in order to create king safety trouble for my opponent. One thing that I'm noticing is that black's rooks are a bit discoordinated, so just keep an eye on that. This rook and this rook are not coordinated with each other. This rook in particular, it's not defended, so there's a chance that in some cases it could become weak. Another thing about bringing this rook up to the third rank is that I could, in some cases, swing it over to help with the defense. So it's actually quite flexible on this square. It's got both attacking ideas and defensive ideas. Now, if you're interested in improving your own positional play and becoming more successful in double-edged positions like this one, then I help ambitious adults at the below 2000 ELO level. If you'd like to explore working together, then click the link in the description below and we can have a chat and see if working together would be a good fit. So, black has just played g5, which to me strikes me as a major mistake. I mean, this is weakening the pawn structure around his own king. It seems to me that there's lots of ways to take advantage of this. There's h4, further looking to soften up the pawn structure. And I'd like you to note as well that black doesn't have the ability to force the queen trade with queen to f4, because I could simply take and black can't take back. So I'm just going to look to punish this pawn move from my opponent. I think this is a bit of a hallmark of players at the 1600 level, is they know that it's important to play with the initiative. They want to be aggressive, they want to force the issue, but they don't always do it in the best way. So a couple of moves ago, I was thinking about, well, I'm going to have to bring this other rook here, and maybe I'll have to give up the two rooks for the black queen in order to get an attack going. But now my plan is made much easier thanks to black deliberately weakening his own pawn structure. So we've got a threat now against this pawn, which I'm not too worried about. And additionally, I might even have an immediate tactic here. Let's see. I was just looking at pawn takes, and taking here, but he can take back, and no, there's nothing there. Okay. Not every move that you look at actually works. But I think what I want to do here really is to just keep opening up the lines towards the black king. I'm just going to ignore this threat. Like, you don't have to respond to every threat. This is a good thing to keep in mind. If your opponent makes a threat, you do have the choice of ignoring it, of course, unless it's a check. But threatening a pawn in the center, I'm not so worried about that. This has to be correct. If he takes with the pawn, I take with the rook. And, well, he can't take with the queen, obviously, because I would just take the queen with the rook. Okay, so this is an almost automatic move. giving a check. He can't really, yeah, he couldn't go there because then the other rook just comes over. So that's a bit too easy. So how can I keep building the pressure now? This rook is actually quite helpful on the file that it's already on, potentially. Let's see. If I take here and he takes here, there has to be a tactic here, I feel. Take, take. Maybe I eliminate this knight at some moment. Ooh, lots of good moves are on offer here. Bringing this other rook over here is also quite tempting, but I want to avoid the case where the black king can hide on e7, which is why I'm thinking that maybe this rook is better where it already is. Taking here, if he were to take with the knight, is that the best move? Maybe I'm looking at this all wrong. Maybe I need to be bringing the queen in somehow, but I have to keep this queen on this diagonal. Bringing the queen here looks very tempting, because then this capture would be met by some ability to come up here. I know that the rook's defending that for now, but maybe if there's a capture here, then that could change. I also have to avoid the possibility of black playing this, because I definitely don't want a queen trade. Alright, let's just look to open up a little bit, and I feel as though an opening of the centre is favouring me. So he does take with the knight. Now, it feels as though I'm really close to something here. We do have this threat to concern ourselves with. Let's see, if he takes here, take here. What I think I want to do is I want to play the bishop here and the rook here, perhaps. That might be the way to go. But I feel very good about this position. I just have to conduct the attack correctly. I think what I'm doing here is I'm bringing the bishop back to support the idea of bringing the rook to f5. And then the queen will have to move, and I might have this line over here in that case. So, yeah, my opponent is going for an attack on b2 here. So let's just be careful. Rook to f5, knight to d3 check is one idea. Because I take with the queen and he takes here, and I do have an escape square, but it does get a bit dicey. But I think I'm alright. I'm going to go for this line. I'm expecting that his idea was to come in this way, because this would be a clearance sacrifice, looking to get the knight out of the way with a check, sacrificing it in order to open up this line. If the queen moves to the wrong square, I do have the possibility of capturing here as well. And I've also got the possibility of coming in here, so this is quite complex for my opponent. He might have to play this, but in that case at least he's not on that same diagonal anymore. He would be on this diagonal though, so I'd have to keep an eye on that pawn. Okay, instead he moves to g7. And I believe that that's a game-ending blunder, because he's lost control of the d6 square. So often when you're playing against players at this level, you just have to keep the pressure up, keep playing actively, and a critical mistake, such as the one that we've just seen, will present itself. Now that's a check, and at a minimum I'm picking up this rook, and at a maximum I'm winning the game, right? let's just grab that one. We don't have to think too hard about that. I can escape that with check, so I'll just go back. And to continue here, do still have to be careful because this is still quite double-edged. There's the possibility of a check here or a check here. I mean, not at the moment because those squares are covered, but even with 30 seconds on my clock, I'm still looking to stay calm and to look at all of black's threats. Now I can increase the pressure here by playing bishop to d5. Are there any checks for black in that position? He does have this check, but I'm not worried about that. I can just go back because he can't take here because the rook is pinned. So this is adding more pressure now. Now this knight is attacked 3 times and defended just twice. And actually it's not even defended twice because the rook is pinned, so effectively that rook is not defending the knight at all. So one threat here is actually rook takes on f7. If he takes with the queen, then he loses the queen. If he takes with the knight, then I can come in capturing here, because the knight would be blocking the defense of the queen along the 7th rank. So you can see the value of tactical training. Even though this position is complicated, I am looking to play it in the most aggressive way possible. Okay, so we've got the queen back, and I do need to just play simply and play well. This is one check, but I'm not worried. I can just move over. So now I'm up a large amount of material, and practically speaking, my time on the clock is low. So what I want to do here is look for simplification. I want to trade pieces, and with the extra material, I will go on to win this. Because I can play a position without queens much more simply than one with queens. In positions like this, you never want to relax. I know that it looks overwhelming, but we can all think of times where we've given away such positions through our own carelessness, can't we? Okay, so queen takes f2 is grabbing a pawn, but that is not going to fly. Now I have a pleasant choice here. I could play the rook over. My opponent resigned first, but I was even considering there to take the pawn just to force the queens off. I'd give up the bishop, but then I'd just have 2 rooks against nothing. Now that you've seen what it takes to beat a 1600 rated opponent, click here to check out the next video in the series. I'll be taking on opponents all the way from 0 to 2000 and showing you how you can win at every level.